In the summer of 1976, a discovery in the remote hills of eastern Kentucky triggered a chain of events that would quietly vanish from public record almost as soon as it surfaced. Hidden beneath a decaying homestead deep in the Appalachian backwoods, 3 children were found living in conditions so strange that officials struggled to explain them, even in private reports. There were no birth records tied to their names, no medical histories, no photographs documenting their existence before that moment. What followed would become one of the most aggressively buried investigations in the region's modern history. The property sat far from paved roads, tucked into forested land locals avoided without needing to be told why. Families in the nearby town knew of the place only in passing, the way people know of abandoned mines or unstable cliffs, by reputation alone. The land had long been associated with the Fowler name, a family that had lived apart from surrounding communities for generations. They were known for keeping to themselves, for avoiding schools, churches, and census takers, and for discouraging outsiders from lingering near their land. The case began when a social worker named Margaret Vance decided to follow up on long-standing rumors that children on the Fowler property had never attended school or received medical care. The whispers she'd heard over the years weren't specific, but they were persistent enough to bother her. On a summer morning in June, she drove as far as the road allowed, abandoned her car, and walked the final stretch through dense forest toward the house. Later testimony would describe an unsettling quiet surrounding the property. No birds, no insects, just the sound of her footsteps and her breathing. The structure itself looked like something built, altered, and repaired over decades without any coherent plan. Windows were covered, wood had decayed into itself, and the air carried a smell she couldn't place, organic, stale, and wrong. When no one answered her calls from the doorway, she heard something else instead. Voices, faint, echoing, coming from beneath the house. Behind the structure, partially concealed by dirt and leaves, she found a wooden door leading underground. The root cellar descended far deeper than expected, its walls made of stacked stone and compacted clay. At the bottom, in the dim light filtering through cracks above, were 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, estimated to be between 8 and 12 years old. They were unnaturally pale, their skin almost translucent with veins visible beneath the surface. Their eyes were large and reflective, catching light in a way that startled her. When they noticed her, they didn't cry or run. They simply stared, as if they had anticipated her arrival. Their clothing appeared handmade, stitched together from salvaged fabric. Their hair was cropped close to the scalp, revealing faint markings, symbols etched or burned into the skin and long since healed. When Margaret asked their names, the oldest girl responded with a sound that resembled neither English nor any dialect Margaret recognized. It was low, vibrating, and unsettling enough to make her stop speaking. Backup arrived within hours. Law enforcement secured the area, and 2 men in unmarked suits assumed control of the scene almost immediately. The children were removed and transported under heavy supervision. A search of the house followed, and what investigators found raised far more questions than answers. Inside, the house appeared abandoned for some time. Furniture was arranged oddly, some facing walls, others overturned. In one room, shelves were lined with jars containing preserved organs. Some could be identified as animal tissue, others could not. A locked back room, nailed shut from the outside, contained walls covered floor to ceiling in symbols matching those on the children's scalps. In the center sat a table with restraints stained with human blood. By the next morning, photographs taken of the room had disappeared. Officers who had entered it first were reassigned without explanation. The children were taken to a medical facility in Lexington that did not officially exist in state directories. There, doctors documented a series of anomalies that defied easy explanation. The children's body temperatures were consistently below normal. Their heart rates suggested severe medical distress, yet they appeared calm and functional. Bone density tests returned abnormal results, and initial blood work prompted immediate genetic analysis. That analysis would quietly change everything. The blood samples were processed by an experienced lab technician named Patricia Gomez. According to later accounts, she reran the tests multiple times, suspecting contamination or equipment error. Each time, the results remained the same. The children had normal human chromosome counts, but the genetic banding patterns did not align with any known population. Their mitochondrial DNA suggested an ancestral separation far older than expected, one that did not fit established models of human migration. Unable to place the samples within any recognized haplogroup, Patricia alerted her supervisor. Within hours, federal agents arrived. The samples were confiscated, notes were taken. Patricia was told the case involved classified research and that there was nothing to worry about. 2 days later, she resigned from her position. She never worked in genetics again. The children were separated shortly after. Records show they were transferred to different facilities across the country, though the documentation is incomplete and heavily redacted. Follow-up inquiries by Margaret Vance were shut down. She was told the children were safe, receiving specialized care, and that further involvement would interfere with a federal investigation. She complied, but kept copies of what she could. Over the years, fragments surfaced through obscure budget documents and heavily censored reports obtained via Freedom of Information requests. These references described continued observation of genetic anomalies, difficulties with language acquisition, and recommendations for permanent separation from the general population. One line noted that the children exhibited signs of distress when exposed to one another, suggesting a psychological or neurological bond. Attempts to trace the children into adulthood have produced nothing. No confirmed public records, no legal documents, no traceable identities beyond the early 1980s. It is as if they were erased. Meanwhile, the Fowler property itself was seized, burned, and later designated protected land. Archaeological surveys revealed a private cemetery containing far more graves than markers, some dating back to the early 1800s. Many stones bore the same symbols found inside the house. Local oral history spoke of generations of isolation, strange behavior, and warnings passed down quietly. Stories of missing children near the property in the late 19th century, of hunters returning shaken, unable to explain what they'd seen or heard in the woods. By 1977, the entire case was classified under national security provisions. Officially, it became a story of child neglect resolved through protective services. Unofficially, it vanished. Margaret Vance died in 2019. Among her belongings was a hidden file containing copies of reports, letters, and notes she had never shared publicly. It remains in private hands. Whether the children survived, whether they are still being studied, or whether their existence ended quietly years ago remains unknown. What is certain is that the Fowler case was not forgotten by accident. It was erased deliberately. And whatever was found beneath that house in the Kentucky hills was something powerful enough to ensure it stayed that way. The lesson. The real lesson isn't fear of the unknown, but fear of silence. When people are hidden, isolated, and stripped of records, abuse becomes easy and accountability disappears. The moment secrecy is treated as normal, cruelty finds space to grow. This story is a warning about power without oversight. When truth is buried behind sealed files and unmarked authority, it stops protecting the vulnerable and starts protecting itself. A society stays human only when it refuses to look away, insists on transparency, and remembers that no one should ever be allowed to disappear without answers. If videos like this unsettle you, that's the point. They're meant to. The past only stays buried when nobody asks questions. If you want more investigations that dig into forgotten cases and uncomfortable truths, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll keep uncovering what was never meant to be found.